Greetings, my friends. I wish I am with you as I have been doing for many of Al-Awda meetings. Almost 18 years today, we held the first Al-Awda conference, Right of Return conference, in Boston in April 2000. And from that date, you in Los Angeles have held this conference almost yearly. I had the pleasure of attending most of them. Why is that so? Because 25 years ago we have been hit by another disaster called Oslo. Oslo is worse than Balfour Declaration. In Balfour Declaration, that was the agreement between two colonial powers in the absence of the owners of the land. In Oslo, the occupier and the occupied sat together to decide the fate of what was left of Palestine. We are against it. We have always been against it. My friends, God bless their soul, Edward Said, Ibrahim Abulod, Nasir Aruri, Shafi al-Hout, Haider Abdul Shafi, all of us in the 90s have made several attempts to reverse that. We held meetings, we wrote petitions, we wrote also to Arafat when he was in power at the time. The culmination of the 90s ended in Boston in April 2000 when the first Al-Awda meeting was held. Now, not only it was held in Los Angeles, but we also held similar meetings in London in 2003 and in Beirut. They allowed us for the first time to hold it in Beirut in 2007 and in Istanbul 2017 because Istanbul was the only country to allow us to hold this conference. And so we have never stopped calling for two things: right of return, that must be our foremost inalienable right. Secondly, that we must have the leadership which will respect our national rights and which will be represented by us through elections, true and democratic. Now, as you know, our motto is right of return is sacred to all Palestinians. It's legal in all covenants of international law, and it is feasible, possible. My studies over so many years have shown that. The last one is in Brown University, Watson Institute for International Affairs, even last month in April, in which I presented the following return plan. Now we should be mapping our return. Here is our return plan. Please watch this from Brown University. Okay, so let us look at Palestine today. I'm talking about Palestine, which is called Israel. And let us examine who lives in the land of those refugees today. We know who lives there. We know where they came from, and we analyze that in detail. I'll show you a result of that. Palestine, during the mandate, has been divided administratively into 1,100 towns and villages. Each one of them has a town or village or more, and it has an area belonging to that village. So we call this village land. Village land is different from the village itself. Village land like that. So we examined how many people living there from the Israel Statistics Bureau, and we found that all the green areas have today no Jews or Jews less than 5,000. Almost 472 villages have practically no Jews, or absolutely zero Jews, or Jews less than 5,000 in each of them. And the documentation is available for someone there. So then the next step will be to see where is the land of the Jews. It is the same like I showed you earlier. That's the land they owned during the British Mandate. And they lived mostly on that land with a little spillover. We'll explain that. Here, for example, we have the cities. The cities are, especially the coastal cities, are mixed population. So the brown area indicate the land of the cities. Cities have a different treatment. But then, where are the Jews occupying the land of Palestinians with a large majority? They occupy the Palestinian land with a large majority, over 30,000, in the dotted areas. You see the dotted here, few of them in the south and the north. Only in that area. The Jews today are majority over the absent Palestinians. Now, next step will be to see in terms of size, proportional size, where do the Jews live? You can see easily where do they live. In Tel Aviv area, and in Jerusalem to the east, and in HAIFA. The three dots at the bottom, big ones I told you about earlier, they are Asdod and Al-Majd al-Asqalan and Beersheba. But most of the Jews live in Tel Aviv area, of course absorbing Jaffa, and about a dozen villages there, and same in Jerusalem West and in HAIFA. Now, we can then say to Palestinians, you can return. The red dots are Palestinian villages. They can return. They will all go to the green area where there is nobody there or very few people who are there. There is no obstruction to the Palestinian refugees returning in the structure of today. I'm talking here about villages, rural villages. I'm excluding, of course, cities, which have a different kind of treatment. We'll come to that in a minute. So actually, this is not a new invention. It's probably obscured from literature, deliberately or otherwise, by the Israelis. This map, this table, is done by Israel 2020. A big plan started in 1995 saying what Israel would look like in 2020. It's an Israeli document which shows that 88% of the land in Israel today is controlled by the army and by kibbutz but the population centers here are less than 8% in 2020, and they are 5% in 1994. Spaces and centers. And the military, of course, occupies all that. So here we have what you all know, but you are afraid to say, Israel is a military base, basically with people in it. It's a huge military base. It's the largest military base from Paris to Peking. That's a fact. Now, we then should say, let us look again at Palestinian villages, and we see that these are Palestinian villages depopulated. The green section of the village are people who found refuge in Gaza, and the brown section of the circle are people who found refuge in West Bank and Jordan. So we can send them back to their villages. They don't need ships or airplanes. They can actually walk. It's within bus ride. We can repeat the same experiment for Galilee. And here there are already in the purple dots, there are Palestinians already there. And if we bring the refugees back, they will add only a small thing. There are half the population in Galilee is Palestinian anyway, and those who come from Syria and Lebanon will hardly add to the whole picture. Now, this is the nice part, but the difficult part in the center, as I said before, around Tel Aviv and so on. What shall we do with that? Well, we can think. For example, we can create cantons. So we create canton Tel Aviv. I have added here in blue the settlement blocks of Jews today in Tel Aviv area. Now, I added also black areas. You can see them black, not here, shown here as being brown. I added this to connect the cantons. This canton actually contains a very large number, almost 3/4 of the Jews in Palestine, in Israel. And the rest of the areas, as I explained before, the dotted one are Jews living in Palestinian land, but the situation is much simpler. One thing I should add very quickly, that if you actually impose on that the built-up area today, the built-up area, the expansion, urban expansion today, it does not cover more than these areas. In other words, the urban expansion today, I have to finish. I'll make coup d'etat. So they still in this area. And I'll hurry. The canton number 2 is in HAIFA. It actually is the same, and we can bring the built-up area still on the same area. There is very few built-up area outside these cantons. Now, then we think of the villages, and here this lovely scene, countryside scene from Google about what they call Israel idyllic or ideal countryside. This picture here conceals a war crime. Here there is a grave of a village. This village is called Beit Jirja. It's destroyed, but the nature was on our side. You see the texture of the landscape is still different because the debris of the building is still there. So what shall we do? Do we know Beit Jirja? Yes, we do. We scouted the world for aerial photographs and maps and so on, and we found Beit Jirja. Here's Beit Jirja. The green areas are the number of houses, and we know the names of the owners of these houses. We have a list of them and all of them. So we can then start thinking of how we can do the return journey for the refugees. Now, on the right side, the exile locations, exile camps, and on the right side, the villages. When we select one camp, this one is in Al-Bas in Lebanon, we know we know the people of that camp, where they come from. They come from the red villages here, and the road leading to that. We can do another example, refugees in camp, Mizdar in Jordan. Here is the camp, here is the camp, and then we have these villages on the right side where the people live there. I mean, they come from there, and then we actually created road system where you can go from the village, from the exile camp to the village, using the modern road system today. And average distance is no more than 60 kilometers, maximum 150 kilometers, and so on. We have another example for a camp in Gaza, Nusayrat camp. Here is the camp, and here are the villages where they come from, and we can lead them to go home. Okay, but they will go home to a deserted place, demolished houses. So we have to think of how we can rebuild these houses. The staging of the return is very straightforward. For example, out of 4.6 million, when the refugees from Gaza return, the number of refugees dropped to half. And then from Jordan, they dropped by 1 million. So actually, it can be done in about 4, 5, 6 stages in about 6 years, and it will be that. Now, we will bring them back to a deserted place. We have to see how we can house them in their location. This is Tantura, with the massacre of Tantura. We actually digitized the aerial photographs. We created a complete map of the village, and with names of houses and so on. This took 5 years at least, but now we have 10,000 files on all the villages. We know what they are like. We know the people there. We know who owned them. We know which refugee camp they live in. We know the road from the refugee camp to this. But then we did something else. We have to see what is the situation today in that village, in Tantura. Yes, 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 coming close. So this is the location. Now we need to build that, rebuild the destroyed. So we made a plan with Palestinian universities that the graduating class of architecture, each one should select a village and had to give a graduation project of reconstructing his village. And this is one example of the winning design in London last year. The one student designed TANTURA again. We have a jury for this, and the jury distinguished architects from Germany, England, and Ireland, and Arab countries. And this year, we have 8 universities participating, not only in Palestine, but also in Jordan too, and the American University of Beirut. And next year, year 3, the competition will be among all universities in the world who would like to do that. Second example of QALUNYA in Jerusalem district. Here is the village, and here is the old village. We digitize it, as you can see in the red lines, and then we see what the location today of the village. That's the location of today. Then the young engineers, young architects, Palestinians, designed the new village in this way. This is a winning design, right? And then last one from HIRIBYA, Gaza district. This is the location, and here is the village of HIRIBYA, and it was redigitized, and then its location is empty, as you can see. So the winning design for HIRIBYA is this one, right? Now, we actually have to examine the costs of construction. These are the stages of construction. How many people are labor required, how much cost is that, and the phases of that, the number of villages in each case. And by the way, we find easy, I mean, I don't know, to me it was startling, but when you think of it, it's not really very strange. And that is the cost of reconstruction villages is less than or equal to the aid given by the United States to Israel in 1 year, not in 70 years, in 1 year. So you see now that our right of return is sacred, as we believe. It's also legal, and it is also possible. There is no legal, logical, logistical, economic, demographic, or geographic reason why it not be applied, it not be implemented. The only reason it is not implemented is Israel racist policies, apartheid policies. Therefore, for justice to be applied in Palestine, Zionism, its theory and practice must be abolished, completely abolished, as it has been similar regimes in the last 100 years been abolished all over the world. To do that, we have to take action. It's not enough to remember and to be steadfast, but we have to take action. The first action we have to do, that we have to elect a leadership which does not forfeit our rights. The right of return is on top of the agenda. We have to elect a leadership which adheres to the national charter. Our country is Palestine, all of it, from Ras al-Naqura to Rashrash, from Rafah to River Jordan. Our people are the Palestinians, all of them, 13 million, not 1/5 of them in the West Bank. And our Palestine is not only the West Bank, our Palestine is all of Palestine. So the urgent task we have to do is to insist on elected leadership. That comes through the following steps. Number one, we have to make groups wherever we are in any part of the world. These groups will form a lobbying pressure to call for our rights. Last February 2017, we held in Istanbul the Popular Conference for Palestinians Abroad, in which 6,000 people attended. From that, we created a General Assembly of about 400, and from that we created an executive committee to call for our rights. You can do that also in the United States. I hope that the efforts being made in the United States to do that will be successful. From all these things, we have to call for elections for all Palestinians all over the world. They will elect members of the Palestine National Council, and this council, properly elected, will elect from within its members, an executive committee called PLO. We have to bring to life PLO, which was strong and filling the whole world in the 70s. We have to create that again. At the moment, there are people who claim to represent us, but actually they literally work against our rights. We have to reverse that. And the only way to reverse them is that we should stand up and be counted and be members, active members, calling for our rights. God bless you. Long live Palestine. Right of return is sacred, legal, and possible. Thank you.